There are many dimensions of state capacity, but this talk is limited to the topic that I was given. So it's very narrowly focused on a very small question in state capacity, namely the issues on constructing high-performance agencies. And even sort of in this limited topic of agencies, I won't spend too much time on why do we need agencies, etc., because that's a different question. I'll touch upon it, but focus very narrowly on the specific question. This is how I intend covering the topic. Spend a couple of minutes on agencies generally in terms of definition. Look a little sort of more at the Indian experience. Here I want to give some examples from recent agencies that have been created, and also look at agencies not so recently created, sometimes about 20 years or so ago, and look at what has been the experience there, and then focus a little on what Ela has actually covered in some detail in her FSLRC presentation, and perhaps then suggest a general way forward. I found it useful to look at this in a framework that has been very nicely developed in the UK. And this is a report written by Sir Leo Plyatsky. This is a 1980 report to the UK government, where he coins this, I thought, a very nice phrase called NDPB, non-departmental public bodies, to describe a whole bunch of agencies which he then goes on to sort of describe in terms of how the British government should structure them and things like that. The definition that he adopts, and which is something which the UK government has now more or less adopted in its formal governmental system, is that it's a body which has a role in the processes of government. And in the UK, this report is on the national government, but is not a government department or part of a department, and which, and this is the operational part, operates to a greater or a lesser extent at arm's length from ministers. The report uses the word minister and ministry sort of interchangeably. So arm's length from government and not a department of the government. That's the kind of agencies that we are talking about. The Indian example, we have had a large number of such bodies. For instance, the first of the sub-bullets is a list of financial sector regulators. The second one is agencies that are not financial sector regulators. I not put all the various bodies that I'm sure many of you are thinking of. This is not an exhaustive list. There is the Central Information Commission. There are a whole bunch of constitutional commissions dealing with SC, ST, backward classes, minorities. I can go on. Even in the appellate authorities list, there are probably a dozen plus. In fact, you can't get at any place a complete list of such bodies. And I think the result of detailed work that my colleague Anirudh and I have done is perhaps we have the most complete list of Government of India bodies of this kind. And I can tell you, it can fill pages and pages. And the point I want to make here is that many of these agencies, especially the ones in the second and the third bullet, are entirely non-functional, and they continue to be non-functional years after their creation. And I need to spend maybe a couple of minutes illustrating this point. Let me start with the agencies in the second list, UIDAI, which is the Unique ID Authority of India. Take an issue like staffing. When the UIDAI was created, the first cabinet meeting created a committee under the Prime Minister of India, and it had practically all of the cabinet ministers that you could think of who were relevant, who constituted this empowered committee under the Prime Minister. 3 years after this committee was created, Nandan was still running around, building after building, trying to get a process for selection of the section officer, which is the lowest level in the officer hierarchy in UIDAI. And eventually, what finally the government gave him was an exact carbon copy of the system of appointment of section officers in the Ministry of Finance or in the Ministry of Home Affairs. In other words, we created an agency where every process that had to be done in UIDAI, whether it was recruitment, and I'm talking about recruitment of government servants available within the government from organized services. I haven't even come to the question of hiring outside expertise, which was the original reason for creating an agency like UIDAI. Even today, the UIDAI follows entirely the process that we follow inside any department in manning posts. Take an agency like the NAT Grid. This is the National Intelligence Grid that was meant to handle issues relating to coordination of intelligence inputs, the kind of issues that we now hear in the context of this Pakistani boat, smugglers, terrorists, God knows what. That issue, multiple agencies with information, coordination, and be able to act in a purposive manner was the purpose of NatGrid. NatGrid hasn't been able to recruit one private sector fellow. This is the third year of its existence. The CEO has been fired. There will be a new CEO who is an insider from the government. Take FIU, which is the Financial Intelligence Unit, established 10 years ago under an act called the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Again, to collect information on money laundering and financing of terrorism based on suspicious transactions which would be reported by financial sector agencies. This is its 10th year of existence, and in the 10th year they have achieved one singular success, which is if they want to get a person from the Reserve Bank of India on deputation on the Reserve Bank of India salary, that has now been permitted in the 10th year of its existence. And how? The salary is paid directly by the Reserve Bank to that officer. Government of India at the end of the year will settle accounts with the Reserve Bank because FIU cannot pay this Reserve Bank officer a salary higher than what the Joint Secretary gets. And therefore, FIU in its 10th year of operation has cracked the problem of expertise within government. We are waiting for a solution for expertise outside of government. And the IT system, which is the heart of the FIU, which is the system which brings in all the intelligence together, pools it, and then generates reports, it has taken them 6.5 years to procure this system. They have now begun to generate reports which are beginning to sort of help intelligence agencies. I can go on. I just want to give one more example before I move to the next slide, which is the Appellate Authority under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. This is an authority which is supposed to confirm confiscation of property done by the enforcing agency, in this case, the Enforcement Directorate, and enable the agency to retain the property till the completion of investigation. This authority has been sanctioned, the judicial hierarchy, namely the chairman and members. Every other person in this agency is now outsourced. And they have been given one contract, which is the outsourcing contract that government has for drivers, for peons, for photocopying operators, with which they have recruited court masters, stenographers, and we have any number of cases where confidential PML orders are dictated to a private sector fellow who will not be your stenographer tomorrow morning, who happily goes and sells these orders in the market, because these guys are all recruited at salaries of peons and drivers. So the outsourcing policy that government had has been imposed on all of these sovereign agencies, and this whole concept of an agency with operational freedom for staffing, funds, is effectively gone for a 6. The point I want to make here very quickly is that essentially when we talk about competent institutions elsewhere, the emphasis is largely on systems, procedures, lot less on the individuals. Nandan going around schmoozing with every friend of his inside government to get permission to hire an IFA, an internal financial advisor from the government, wasn't the purpose of an intellectual giant like him. Presumably, he should have been spending his time really building UIDAI. Essentially, the big individual comes in only to ensure that he is able to or she is able to get very basic things done in government. So the whole emphasis on the get the right person for the job in India, in my opinion now, after sort of working on some of these issues, is I think a clear flip side of our failure on building depersonalized institutions. The only way, therefore, we can construct an agency is to get a rock star, and the rock star then will have to use a lot of his or her personal charm and his ability to get through government to get routine things done. So the idea is, can we move to a framework which takes care of some of these issues? Essentially, I think the fundamental theoretical construct here is the principal-agent relationship. Who is the principal and who is the agent? What is the precise outsourcing that the principal does to the agent? And is this outsourcing by law or an executive order? Can we write this contract between the principal and agent better? The focus of this contract should be on three critical elements. State objectives of the agency very clearly, and I want to go back to the example that Ela gave. The objective of the payment system regulator in India is to regulate the payment system. Surely that is not an objective. We need greater clarity on the objective. Once we have greater clarity on the objective, the powers given to the agent clearly flow from that objective and will also be equally clear. And then accountability mechanisms to ensure that the agent is delivering on the contract. To give an example, slightly worse than the one that she gave, this is a section of the SEBI Act which Mr. Bhave would be very familiar with. Essentially, the 2-3 points I want to emphasize here. SEBI can make such order as is necessary in the interest of investors or orderly development of securities market, and it can be to prevent the affairs of an intermediary being conducted in a manner detrimental to the interest of investors. And it goes on to say who all can be the recipient of this order of SEBI. And as you can guess, a bulk of SEBI's orders have been under Section 11B. In fact, the numbers are astounding. It's a disproportionately large part of SEBI orders, excluding your time, sir, is under Section 11B. So one can multiply with examples of similar, equally vaguely worded sections which give enormous powers. So the short point here is clarity of purpose, 1. 2, when there are multiple objectives, you need to prioritize these objectives. Ideally, give a single objective. In case you can't, if there is a set of objectives, lack of prioritization and giving the priority to the agent clearly muddies water. And an example of what should not be delegated, clearly a political function which should be with the department. For instance, the question theoretically of whether there should be FDI in retail is in theory a FEMA regulation question which is actually with the RBI. The legal responsibility for deciding on FDI in retail under the Indian legal system, the legal power rests with the RBI, not with the government. So one more example of complete mixing up of political functions with what ought to be regulatory is sort of the Indian system is replete with examples. What are the requirements in terms of the agent being able to be effective? Ability to receive and process information, and by what means? Essentially, a good quality organization design, the appropriate facilities, very important, HR processes and manuals which standardize these operations. UK has an excellent framework which is now called the Manual on NDPBs, where a lot of these questions are first answered before an agency is in the first place created. And having created the agency, and all of these questions that I've posed there formally need to be answered by the department, the one which is creating the agency, gets cleared at the level of the cabinet, and the moment an NDPB, non-departmental public body, is created, a classification needs to be obtained, and this is the Office of National Statistics, His Majesty's Treasury, or the Cabinet Office. All three of them have an interest in the classification, and this is the best part that I liked in the UK system, which is the taxonomy of NDPBs in the UK. All agencies fall in one of these categories, and the moment the Cabinet has put you, let's say, in tribunal NDPBs, an entire manual kicks in. There is no going to the Department of Personnel, Department of Home, Finance, anybody after this. This is how you will be allowed to recruit people. This is your auditing mechanism. This is how Parliament will appropriate money. Every little detail in terms of how the agency needs to be created, how the agency needs to operate, how the agency will be accountable is put down here. The attempt, I think, in our system should be to try and move towards something like this, create a taxonomy which suits our purpose, and try and put this standardized framework. I'll conclude with this. Thank you.